hire a lawyer so the lawyer can contact the deportation officer, can contact ICE, find out what the basis of them being detained is.
If you or someone you know is facing deportation, what can you do about it? Well, that's what we're going to find out right now, because that's what we're going to ask on this episode of Ask the Lawyer. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is New York City attorney Cory Forman. I want to remind you right off the top, if you want to ask Cory questions of your own, just go to AskTheLawyers.com, click the button at the top of the page that says Ask a Lawyer, or you can just call the phone number on the screen. Cory, it's good to see you again. Thank you for helping us out.
Great seeing you too, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So let's just talk a little bit about, you've had some experience, I suppose, with helping people that have been detained by immigration officials or maybe facing deportation. Tell me a little bit about how much experience you have in that area.
Yeah, I started out as a criminal defense attorney, and then that was since really 2000. And then 2006, 2007, I started focusing on representing non-citizens and people detained in immigration, but also by criminal, but have collateral consequences, that because they're not citizens, they face extra consequences, more significant consequences. They'll often wind up from a criminal prison into an immigration, and their problems more from just not only criminal problems, but even when the criminal case is over, they could wind up with deportation proceedings issued against them. So that's where my sort of bread and butter is.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that then. What can be done, first of all, if someone is facing criminal charges or is being charged with a crime and facing deportation, and what are some of the more common things that happen that might cause them to have some issues there?
Well, I mean, what could be done, there's two major questions you're always going to ask in any removal proceeding.
Okay.
Is the individual removable, or better known as deportable, from the country? And is there a way to defend against that charge? Most of the time, well, not always, but most of the time the answer to that question is going to be yes. And the second question is, well, are they eligible for relief? Is there any mechanism by which they could stay in the United States or lawfully? And that really depends on a lot of factors. The first being, what is their current status? How do they enter the United States? Do they have any eligibility for relief? Are there any things that disqualify them? So that's the analysis. And obviously, the first and foremost question that a lot of families are going to ask me is, can the person get out to deal with this, or do they have to remain in custody? And really, someone could wind up in deportation proceedings for a whole variety of reasons. Legal residents that have committed certain crimes. People could wind up in proceedings just by virtue of the fact that they've overstayed a visa, or they entered unlawfully, or they've committed another immigration violation. So there's a whole lot of reasons why someone could wind up in proceedings. And again, it depends on the circumstances.
And to that question that you said you get asked about, can they fight this, get out to fight it, or they have to be detained while they fight? Is that depend on the case, or?
Well, I mean, again, two components. The immigration law does have what I feel is a draconian aspect of it called mandatory detention, meaning there are some violations, mostly related to certain criminal offenses, that even if a judge or any immigration adjudicator wanted to issue the person a bond or let them post a bail, the law prohibits from doing that. So they must remain in custody. If, though, they don't fall under mandatory detention, it becomes a discretionary analysis. Sometimes the person's deportation officer could choose to release them once they process the case, tell them to come back to court. Other times you have to ask a judge for a bond hearing. The government's going to contest bond, and you have a hearing, where the positive and negative equities are looked at. The likelihood of the person returning to court is looked at, and they'll make a determination. And if you get denied bond, you could appeal. But it really, again, there is the first is, the first question is the person eligible for bond? And a lot of people are not, much more so than you would think, especially compared to the criminal system.
You mentioned, say, being charged unlawfully overstaying a visa. Is that a criminal charge, and what can be done in those cases?
No, unlawfully, and this comes up a lot in my practice, unlawful overstay is not a criminal charge. It is, though, an immigration violation. So it does subject somebody to removal. Now, is that person a priority? Now, no. Before the election, yes. That's very administration dependent. Every presidential administration will have a list of priorities. Under the Trump administration, there was no priority. Everybody was a priority. They didn't delegate between them. Under this current administration, there's different levels. So merely overstaying a visa is not going to be the highest level of priority, but it is still a deportable immigration civil violation. And the reason why it comes up a lot in my practice is I'll get a lot of questions from other criminal defense attorneys who call on us about, well, is this person deportable if they plead to a certain offense?
Right.
That's overstayed a visa. Well, they're deportable by virtue of the fact that they've overstayed a visa. The criminal offense is really how significant that's going to be in their ultimate removal proceeding is a separate question.
So we started off the whole thing, Cory, I asked, what do you do if you say you have a loved one that has been detained and is facing deportation? What's the process? What do you do? Take us there. What's the first step?
Well, the first part is obviously, hire a lawyer so the lawyer can contact the deportation officer, can contact ICE, find out what, the basis of them being detained is. Often it's very difficult, unfortunately, to track down where the individual is taken. It's not like, with the criminal practice where they're going to go to a certain local jail. You have no idea where they're going to wind up. Here in New York, they'll wind up in one place for processing, but what jail they wind up, you don't know. So the sooner a lawyer's involved, they could track down that information. And then you want to go visit with the person if they're detained. If they're not detained and they're ultimately released 4, 5, 6 hours, you want to schedule an appointment for the loved one to come and meet with an attorney. But before they do any talking or really to cut off any of the conversations that they're going to have with government officials, just like in the criminal world, they should be retaining a lawyer to at least work as a liaison, if not an advocate for them.
It's just the few times that we've spoken, Cory, I can tell this whole immigration process, and especially when you figure in a criminal process with it, it's very complicated. Having someone like yourself who is able to do both and navigate through both is so important. And then you throw in dealing with the government on top of that. It just seems like having somebody like yourself who can handle all that it's not the kind of thing somebody can handle on their own.
Well, no, I mean, our job is to help people navigate an incredibly complex ocean. There's a lot of obstacles in that ocean. It takes years and years and years of experience to figure out how to do that, who to talk to, who are the people that you speak to, what the person's rights are. And it's unrealistic to expect, someone who's not educated, but not educated in that specific area to know that, which is why we get calls from lawyers all over the country in many practice areas that just don't do this work, knowing it's highly specialized, that, bring us on board for their cases if one of their clients on another matter happens to have an immigrant-related issue.
Fascinating information. It's always good to talk to you, Cory. Thank you for making some time to answer our questions.
My pleasure, Rob. Thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been New York City attorney Cory Forman. I remind you, if you'd like to ask questions about your specific situation, go to AskTheLawyers.com. There's a button at the top of the page that says Ask a Lawyer. You can ask your question right there, or you can just call the phone number on the screen. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with Ask the Lawyers.